Hello and welcome to the Fatboss Guide to Megaera 10-man normal in the Throne of Thunder.
Yes, and this fight, it's very unique, I suppose. It's quite interesting.
It's something completely new. It just revolves around killing sort of snake heads. The boss has like loads of different heads.
It's very strange. It's very cool though. Very, very nice.
For this encounter you want to bring 2 tanks, 3 healers and a mixed DPS makeup. The DPS you bring doesn't really matter. It's more or less just single target DPS the entire fight with a little bit of movement now and then, so yeah, it doesn't really matter too much though. So like we said, it's like a multi-headed snake boss, and there's 3 different types of heads. There is Frost, Venom and Fire, but to start with, the boss will always start with Frost and Venom. Now every time you kill a head, both heads in play will despawn, and the killed head will reappear in like some concealing fog. Inside the concealing fog you can't actually reach them. Yeah, there's not much you can do about that. And the heads within the concealing fog will gain new abilities, but you cannot kill them. Then the other head that you decided not to kill will then reappear with a 20% haste increase, and a different head will replace the one that you previously killed.
So say you just killed Fire and you had Fire and Frost, you killed Fire, then Venom would spawn with Frost and Fire would fuck off into the background and start doing his fiery abilities at you.
Now you kill the boss by killing 7 heads, and every time a head dies, the head of that particular type will gain a 15% damage increase, and this does stack. Also, when you do kill a head and the old one and a new head reappear, they'll cast something called Rampage. Now this is like a 20-second massive AoE damage on the raid. For this, you just need to stack up and just heal as much as you possibly can.
What's to note for tanks in this bit, you don't need to be in melee range of the heads during the rampage, but you just got to make sure that you are there as soon as the rampage ends, otherwise they start firing at people doing a shit ton of damage. So you just got to make sure you're there for the end. So if you do need to stack up to heal because you are very, very low for some reason, then you can stack up. You don't need to worry about that too much.
Now before we get into any particular kill order, we're going to talk about the boss's mechanics individually. Now first we're going to talk about the flaming one, which is the red one.
Now each boss does have like a frontal cone breath, and the frontal cone breath of the flaming head, which is the fire head, is an ability called Ignite Flesh. Now this hurts very, very much, and it leaves a really hard ticking dot on you. That lasts for 45 seconds, and this stacks up as well, and of course every time it stacks it does more and more damage.
Now for every single breath really you want to use some form of cooldown, and if you don't have a cooldown you should tell your healers. And as the damage from the particular mob that you're killing throughout the fight becomes more, it hurts harder as the fight goes on, you're definitely going to need to make sure that you have a cooldown up. Now each time a head is up you should only really get hit by these breaths maybe 3 times.
Yeah.
If you get hit by a 4th, then your DPS is looking a little bit low. If you go for 4 stacks, it's just so much more healing, especially from this Ignite Flesh, because the dot is really, really nasty. That's where things like Purity help as well. Purity is really nice for this dot.
Just to note though, for the first pull, the first time you actually pull the boss, because normally it rampages, you can DPS the heads during the rampage, and when you come out the rampage on about 70% health, you're starting the boss, it'll be 100%, so you're very likely to get 4 stacks on the very first time you kill a head in the encounter.
Now, when the flaming heads are inside the concealing fog, they'll gain an ability called Cinders. This will apply a hard ticking dot to a random player that when they're dispelled will spawn a pool of fire underneath them. When you have this debuff, you're also able to melt ice, and you'll understand how that works in a moment.
And another note with the pools of fire, of course, apart from not standing in them, they do despawn after 1 minute. Now moving on to the Frost Head, and the Frost Head also has, as we said, a hard-hitting frontal cone breath. Now this applies a debuff that is really kind of nothing unless it reaches 5 stacks, and that means that your DPS is way, way too low. So if you hit 5 stacks with this debuff, you will just become stunned.
For 20 seconds. So.
Yeah, so it's horrible. You cannot get stunned by this basically. Never reach 5 stacks on this, and yeah.
Now if the Frost Heads are inside the concealing fog, they'll cast something called Torrent of Ice. Now this is a channeled beam on a random player that deals high frost damage if you're hit by it, so you need to kite it around. And this beam lasts for 8 seconds. However, while you are kiting it, the path that you take, it will leave a frozen ground. Now the frozen ground, if you stand in it, if anyone stands in it, it deals high ticking damage, and it also slows you, and it will eventually root you. So don't ever stand inside this. Now this beam can actually be used to put out the Cinders, which is the fire pool on the ground. So that's something to keep in mind.
Now this frozen ground that has just been spawned in by the Torrent of Ice, this is what you use your cinders debuff, and you run over the ice and it gets rid of the ice. And
so basically they counter each other.
Yeah, they counter each other. And last but not least, we're going to have a look at the Venom Head. Now, of course, once again, frontal cone, but this one, the debuff that it applies to you is a 10% damage taken increase for 45 seconds, and of course, it stacks up. There's nothing really you can do about this, of course, but just to use cooldowns on breaths, because breaths are really, really painful, especially because you are taking extra damage, but it's nothing like the red one. The red one's pretty much the worst, so.
Now, when the Venom is in the concealing fog, they will target a random player and spawn a globule of acid at them. Now, the landing zone of where this is about to land and deal damage is like a pulsy, yellowy green circle thingy. So just make sure you move away from the circle, and the further away from the impact zone you are, the less damage you'll actually take from it. So that's something to keep in mind.
Now, with moving away from it, though, you don't have to move really, really far away from it. Like, it's nowhere as bad as, like, I know, Madness Bolts, whereas if you need to cover that much ground. You do need to cover quite a lot of ground, but not that much ground.
Yeah, you don't need to go over the top. And these bolts, as the fight gets on, you end up getting quite a lot of them at one point, so you shouldn't need to worry about them too much. One thing to note, while the snakes are inside the concealing fog, they'll only do the abilities that they gain in the concealing fog. They won't do their frontal cone or hit the tanks or anything. They'll only do those abilities, just to make sure that you know.
And the thing is, multiple head spawn. It might look like, oh, the boss only has 3 heads. Now, the boss has many hidden heads under the surface. So you start the fight and you have Venom and you have Frost. Say you kill Venom first, then Venom will go to the back, and then you kill the, I don't know, Frost, and then Venom will come back to the front, but one Venom will stay behind at the back, so you still will be getting bolts. So that's to say, every time you kill one of the heads, that ability will be coming in regardless if it's at the front or the back or not.
And what we did for our particular kill, we decided that the Ice Beam, we found it irritating. We personally found it more of an annoyance than anything else. And although every time you don't kill a head and it comes back up, it gains a 20% haste increase, the Frost melee hits are very, very low. They don't actually hit hard at all. It's just the breath that hits hard. For this particular tactic that we're sharing with you, you only kill Venom and Flame, and that's it.
This just means that you will not have any of that ice beamy stuff. It's very, very agitating. Towards the end of the fight, you are getting so many beams of ice coming in, regardless of how many heads you killed. You killed 1 frost head, or you killed 1,000 frost heads. Towards the end of the fight, you're going to get loads and loads of frost beams everywhere. And it's a massive pain to go and clear them all up with the cinders, especially because of all the acid bombs coming in. The healers have to do a lot of moving while keeping the tanks up, and they can't keep you up if you've got cinders. It gets very messy. At least for normal mode, this tactic you can indeed do. It means that you completely negate the frost beam. It's not necessarily going to work in heroic, but for normal mode, this tactic is just a very simple, clean, and you don't have to. You completely just get rid of one of the mechanics. So literally throughout the fight, you just move from the bombs and dispel the cinders
out of the raid.
Out of the raid, yeah. So that's it. That's all you have to do, and kill heads, and then you've got the fight.
One thing to note for the tanks is that you have to switch which mob you was tanking previously. Although the Rampage is 20 seconds long, your debuff is still continuing. So if you was tanking Frost, you then need to move on to the new mob that spawns, so it would be Venom or Fire. You can never just consistently tank the same mob over and over again, because the stack will carry over on the first breath that happens after the Rampage. So apart from the tanks making sure that they face the mob away so the raid doesn't get breathed, making sure that you switch your snake that you're tanking after one of the heads has actually died, it's just all about using your cooldowns properly during Rampage. Make sure that you're keeping your mana up and avoiding bolts and dispelling outside the group, and that is essentially it.
So thank you guys for watching. If this guide did help you out, then please do give us a thumbs up. It helps us out quite a lot, and thank you for watching.
Thanks for watching.